What's happened in my experience is you get a bunch of people in a room, you are in there for hours, you talk about a lot of good things, but at the end of the session, it's like, oh, was someone supposed to take notes? What are we supposed to do next?
I always
And you
love that
feel,
the question comes up at the end. Did somebody take
yeah,
notes?
exactly. You've been there, you know. So it's
Yes.
like, okay, how can we make those sessions work a little bit better? And I know you have something called the 4 C's framework, and that's something that can help us actually achieve those tangible outcomes. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we have Jeff Panning with us, and I'm so excited to have Jeff on the show. First of all, for his expertise in this specific area, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, but also because Jeff is one of the first real subscribers, and I guess I would say fans, maybe. I don't know, that feels a little weird to say fan, but Jeff has been so supportive of me over the YouTube journey, and then as I've started posting on LinkedIn. I've been really grateful to you. Thank you, Jeff, for all of your support, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm definitely a fan.
Thank you. I'm a fan of yours too. And I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone else will be as well after this episode. I want to tell everyone a little bit about you first before we get into this. So Jeff's been working inside teams as a project manager, as I'm sure an analyst, as a meeting facilitator, all kinds of things, right? For a long time. You've had a career in information technology, but now you're focused specifically on helping teams collaborate better in this world where we're distributed, we're remote, things look a little different than they did years ago, and so our work needs to adapt. And actually, you recently updated your LinkedIn tagline to reflect that change. And I'm wondering, can you share with us your LinkedIn tagline? I read it this morning. I was like, oh, that sounds really good.
Well, thank
Can you
you.
share it with us?
Yes, the new tagline is fueling collaboration to help teams reach their results, their desired results. And so I think there's a lot of things we can do with teams and the collaboration. I think a lot of the value out of teams comes from the collaboration. So it's really focusing on a lot of things that we could do together and working together more effectively and efficiently to reach those outcomes.
I really like it. And I like how you specifically called out results, like you said, specific outcomes, because that's really what it's all about. And what we're going to talk about today are some specific techniques, some tips, some things that you've learned that can really help us with guiding our conversations and our meetings to get those specific results, whether we're in person, we're remote, whatever. And we know meetings have gotten so much attention lately over the past few years. It's like people tend to be in one camp or the other. We love meetings or we hate them. And it's been a journey for folks to figure out, okay, what's the right balance? How do we make meetings work for us given whatever situation that we're in? And I want to talk about one specific type of meeting or gathering first, and that is like collaboration or brainstorm sessions, because these sort of gatherings usually happen. They're going to happen before you start a formal project, right? Before you have the definite criteria for what we need to do. But so often these are hard to manage. They're hard to facilitate, because what's happened in my experience is you get a bunch of people in a room, you are in there for hours, you talk about a lot of good things, but at the end of the session, it's like, oh, was someone supposed to take notes? What are we supposed to do next?
I always
And you
love that
feel,
the question comes up at the end. Did somebody take
yeah,
notes?
exactly. You've been there, you know. So
Yes.
it's like, okay, how can we make those sessions work a little bit better? And I know you have something called the 4 C's framework, and that's something that can help us actually achieve those tangible outcomes, the
Yeah,
real outcomes that we want. So could you share with us a little bit about that?
sure. Love to. So the 4 C's framework came from a company called AJ and Smart in Berlin. And I took a course from them a couple years ago on workshopping and workshop and facilitation. And the way it works is you can use this for both meetings or workshops. And it's basically the phases of a meeting that you look at. There's 4 C's. It's collect, choose, create, and commit. And if you follow those and add that structure to your meetings, you can be sure that you're going to have some outcomes specified and you're going to have people assigned at the end. So let me step through them a little bit here. So collect is basically the first step, and that's a matter of going through and getting all the information, getting ideas, um, getting possible solutions to a problem if it's a problem solving, really just collecting feedback and information from people in the meeting. There's different ways you can do that, but basically it's the first step is to collect all that. It's important to do that in the voice of the customer. In other words, in the voice of that person. So a lot of times the online tools like Miro, Mural, different ones like that, the online interactive boards are helpful because you can just create a sticky note up there where people can put their own words in there. And so the second stage is choose. So now that you've got all these sticky notes, just random order, what you'll do is organize them and cluster them into like themes. So you may have a couple here, one here and one here, they're very similar. You put those next to each other, group a couple of others up there. So you're going to start seeing some groups and some themes come out. And then what you're going to do is you're going to vote. You're going to give everyone 3, maybe 5 votes and tell them to go and vote on the ones that they think have the biggest impact that they want to continue discussing in that meeting. Because you can't discuss them all.
Yeah.
There's going to be some very similar, but you want to kind of narrow down the focus a little bit and choose the ones that are best that you want to continue talking about. So that's the second one. That was choose. The third one is create. This is a brainstorming one. We're going to take those few that you chose. You're going to go and brainstorm. Maybe if it's a problem solving, you're going to come up with next steps. Maybe if it's something else, you're going to decide options. You're going to have to give people some time and just have them come up with as many different ideas as they can. No bad ideas, quantity over quality, all that stuff. And that's basically to get all those additional ideas up there in the create stage. The last stage then is commit. So what you're going to do is you're going to do another vote. And so you're doing a problem solving and you want to decide what next steps are. So you're going to go back to everything that you did in brainstorming and you're going to choose the ones that are the best. You're going to vote on those and you're going to take them over to an action board that is basically impact by difficulty. And what you'll do is you'll rank them first of all by impact, higher impact to lower impact, just stack rank them vertically. And then what you'll do is you'll take each one at a time and say, what's this going to be like to implement? Is it more difficult to implement or less difficult to implement? So you move it left or right. And then by the time you're done, you have a 2x2. They also call it the Eisenhower matrix, where you can look to see what's the biggest impact, least difficulty. Those are probably the ones you're going to go after first and just get those done. The next one next to it are the highest impact, a little bit more difficult. You may turn those into projects. And then you've got the 2 on the bottom. You've got the lower impact and more difficult. You may want to decide if you want to do those or not, or maybe refactor those into something to make them less difficult. Something that you may want to implement down the road. And then the other one is less impact and less difficult, and that may just go in the backlog somewhere that you may want to do. The last step of the confirm stage, the last stage, is to assign these tasks to people and set up deadlines and things like that. So basically at the end of the meeting, you're walking away with a list of things that you're going to do and who's going to do them and dates and things like that. So you've got basically went from a lot of chaos initially to a very structured plan at the end.
I love it. Yeah, because like you said, a lot of us come in that chaotic state and we do a lot of what's on this list, but there isn't any structure to it. Or maybe there isn't that person that's really owning the meeting, which leads me to my next question. In a situation like this, it sounds like there should be a dedicated meeting facilitator who's familiar with the framework that can guide us through this.
It really does help.
Yeah.
If you have someone leading the meeting that's also in the discussion, it's very difficult to watch timing, making sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to talk and just kind of, overseeing and guiding people through the process. Because it is definitely a process that you want to set up. You want to design the meeting with these 4 C's in mind, but then you also have to go through in time, make sure you got the appropriate amount of time in each step. And then just managing the board to carry things through. Or if you're doing it in person, working in the conference room to move the sticky notes around from one exercise to the other. So it's really hard
Sure.
to wear those two hats.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot going on. Is this something that would fall into a project manager's bucket? Would this be something that project managers could become familiar with to help their teams?
Absolutely. I think it's a great skill for project managers to pick up with facilitation and being able to bring some of these different skills and techniques to different meetings. It kind of brings a lot of different ways and methods and makes meetings a lot more interesting than just sitting down and doing the same thing every single meeting.
Right, right. Taking notes and then, yeah.
Right.
So, okay, I'm asking this question because I know there's going to be some folks out there that are interested in implementing this and practically want to make sure they go about doing this in a way that's helpful to their teams. How long? I know this is going to depend on the size of the team and the amount of ideas, but how long would you schedule one of these meetings for? Is this like a 2-hour meeting, a 3-hour meeting, and maybe how many people would you recommend be in attendance? Like, what's that bandwidth for this meeting?
As far as the number of people, I'd say that probably 6, 8, 10 people. You probably don't want to have
Mhm.
too many people because it's just going to make things a little bit more difficult to uh, just to facilitate and monitor and manage all the people there. But as far as timing, I think it really depends on the topic. And sometimes you can break these up, but you can easily do this sort of exercise within an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, that's so shocking to me because it makes sense if you have this framework and you have a guide to take you through it because so often I've been in these brainstorm meetings and they're like a day. They're a day,
right,
a full day, and you don't really make any progress. But with this, you could, especially if you have folks that are coming prepared with those ideas already. That would
right.
be a recommendation that I would probably put forth to my team. But yeah, this is great. And like you said, you could do this in person in the conference room and have sticky notes, or you could do this virtually with a tool like Miro. I know you're super familiar with Miro. We've taken a look
Mhm.
at that before. Great, great for virtual or dispersed teams. Um, and that kind of leads us to our next question, which is around managing and navigating virtual, dispersed, remote teams. I've been in this boat before where, as the project manager, I'm the only remote person, and that can sometimes feel isolating. Or as a project manager, I might be on site, but I have teams that are all over the place. And it's especially we're talking 5 or 10 years ago when that wasn't as common. It was pretty tricky. You'd try to use an actual whiteboard in the office, and people would say, "Oh, I can't see that," or "This doesn't
Zooming in on
work."
the board and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
But now we have these tools like Miro, and it's like a virtual, what would you call it? Like a virtual whiteboard, a virtual, what would you say?
There's an interactive, virtual interactive board.
Yeah. Yeah. So you feel like you're all together. And I think one of the things that you and I discussed when we first chatted about doing this session a few weeks, months ago, is that if you are a team that maybe has some people remote and some people in person, it's recommended to just use that virtual option for everyone so that you are all kind of equal. So don't have some people in the office using the whiteboard and others using Miro,
Right,
right?
right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. I like to look at it as just leveling the playing field. So if you have some people remote outside the office and some people in a conference room, if, like you said in the past, it's always favored really the people in person because they're the ones having the informal conversations. They're able to see the board better, just able to do everything better. And the people remote, don't feel the same engagement, aren't able to participate in the same. It's one thing I'd like to do is just level the playing field. Have everyone bring their laptops into the office and everyone connects up to Teams or Zoom or whatever you're using individually so everyone can see your face individually. The other thing that's bad is about some of these offices have one camera. And so you see people way in the distance at a table. Sometimes you can't even see everyone, but you can't see their expressions. You can't really tell who's talking because it's zoomed out so far just to see everyone. But by having everyone bring their own laptop, and so you can see their faces, so it's like a personal conversation with each person. And then with audio, what I like to do is just put a common speaker in the middle of everyone in the office, so you share one speaker, so you're not getting all the echoes and things like that from everyone's laptop. But
That's
then
a
on top of that, I like
fantastic
using
suggestion.
Miro.
Yeah.
It's just that whiteboard that everyone basically has the same experience, same access to. You could save things afterwards. You can create them as PDFs and distribute them. You just do so much more than you could on a whiteboard with distributed teams like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, I've worked with teams before where there is something about being in person and using that whiteboard and being
Sure.
able to write on it. And then we'll take a picture of it with our
Right.
phones, share it or
Right.
whatever. I loved your point about everybody bring in your laptop and get on the call because I have teams that I work with, and one in particular, and every time I have a call, it's me. I'm the only one that's remote. So it's like me on this huge screen in this conference room, and then everybody else is sitting down. And so my view as the remote person is all these people in the conference room at the table, and I can't see their faces, but their
Right.
view of me is like this
Right.
huge person. So when I went to visit, I went to visit them in person. I didn't realize how big the screen was until I went to visit in person. And I said, are you guys looking at me
Was I
on
on
that screen?
that?
I said, that's terrifying. They say, yeah, you look a lot smaller in person. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, I think the other thing that I've heard multiple times and have actually experienced multiple times as well is that if you have a team and a project, getting together initially in person so you can have those conversations, start forming those relationships and things like that makes the remote work so much easier down the road. And then
Yes.
if you're all just on the computer on Zoom or Teams, it's much easier to still collaborate. And you kind of know each other a little bit better. So you're able to kind of understand where people are coming from, their personalities, their backgrounds, and all that kind of stuff as well.
I second that 100%. I've been doing remote work, gosh, for like 15 years now. And I remember the first team who I worked with, it was a software startup. We didn't meet each other until 2 years into it. And the day that we all got together, it was the coolest thing because we didn't even do video calls back then.
Oh,
We were
wow.
just
Yeah,
doing, phone conferencing. So we got
right.
to see each other in person. You see, like you said, even the little mannerisms, facial expressions that people have, the person who's maybe quiet on the phone or on the call, you realize that there's like that's who they are. Like it's just a part of how they're processing and it's
Right.
not just silence. I think
Right.
that's really helpful to put those characteristics to faces and then you can work remote and you know how people operate.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So I did have a question for you around this. In situations where teams are partially distributed, like we were talking about having full participation, making sure that everyone is engaged. You already gave us some good tips there, but do you have any other tips for us on how we could make sure we get that full participation and maximum benefit from folks when we are working with teams that are partially remote or fully remote? Any other tips?
Yeah, I think a couple things with that. I think the having effective meetings and having meetings that people feel like they're getting something out of and able to put something into is one key. And so I think as a team, as an organization, it's helpful to decide what types of meetings you're going to have. There's only really, if you think about it, there's only probably maybe a handful of different types of meetings out there. There's status meetings, there's decision-making meetings, there's problem-solving meetings, there's, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But really deciding what type of meeting those are going to be, and then how are you going to hold those is effective up front. And then everyone's kind of on the same page. Now you say basically we're not just having a meeting, we're having a decision-making meeting. And then I think within those meetings, bring different techniques to the table, basically like Miro and different techniques for sharing, collaborating. Maybe it's not just the same discussion. One of the worst meetings I've ever been in, it was one where it was a project meeting and there was a ton of different issues that everyone had their own issue that they wanted to talk about. And so we got on the call, we scheduled for an hour, which probably wasn't enough up front anyway, but just wanted to start to get the conversation going. Well, you know how it is sometimes. A couple of people start taking over the conversation. And
Yeah.
after an hour, I think we had discussed two different topics and we had all these different ones out there. And so I think one of the ways you can get around that and make those meetings better is through the collaboration through like Miro and things like that, where basically everyone gets in the meeting first of all and they put a sticky note up there, the things that they want to talk about. There's a method called lean coffee that I've used quite a bit where you do just that. Everyone gets 2-3 minutes to just put as many different topics up there on the board that they want to talk about, and then you vote. So you're going through the 4 C's. You're collecting information, you're choosing it, and then you're going to basically drag the top vote getters over into a column of what's going to be discussed. You set a time frame. Okay, we're going to discuss this for 5 minutes. At the end of 5 minutes, we're going to vote to see who wants to continue talking about it, who wants to go on to the next topic. And so it's never more than, if you extend it, it's 2-3 minutes. So it's never more than 8 minutes per topic. And if there needs to be more discussion, you put that on a parking lot and you discuss it later with the specific people that need to be there. But that's one example of a great way to get through the meeting and get through more issues, to really address more of the issues that people really want. Because if it was me, and what I've experienced in the past is that there's nothing worse than going to a meeting where you feel like, okay, I'm not getting anything out of this. I really don't
Yeah.
want to be here. I shouldn't be here. And if I have things to say, I can't get them across anyway. And so this kind of helps with that sort of thing. And I think a facilitator can help with a lot of these things as well to kind of facilitate the process. And the word facilitation actually comes from the word facile, which means to make easier.
Easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's really cool. I didn't
Yeah.
know that. That makes a lot of sense though. And I like your suggestion about how to help the flow of the meeting. I think that that's really valuable advice also for project managers who are more junior, maybe earlier in their career. I hear this often from that demographic, and I know that was something that I struggled with earlier on in my career was like, how do I'm not as experienced, so how do I have control over this meeting, or how do I help guide this meeting, especially when you have those voices that are a little louder. So setting that expectation up front of this is what the meeting is about. This is a decision-making meeting for these 3 items. We're going to be making decisions, and here's how that's going to happen. Communicating that out up front, having your meeting agenda ready, letting people know that this is how the meeting's gonna go, and then actually staying true to that
Right.
will help you a lot in your meeting facilitation skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit more about the meeting facilitator. We've touched on it a little bit. You've already educated us that facilitation comes from the word fast. It means
Facile.
easy, fast. Okay,
Yeah, to make easier.
I'm going back to Spanish, like my high school Spanish. And I feel like there's a word that's similar to that in Spanish, which is why that made sense when you
Oh yeah.
said it. Okay. Yes. But yeah, it's gone. It's somewhere in there, but I can't access
It'll come out later.
it. So I think that's really great to kind of segue into this topic because sometimes when we think of the meeting facilitator, it's like, oh, I need to be the one that's like in charge, or I need to be the one making the decisions. But that's not really what it's about. As we've learned from you in these first couple of questions, meeting facilitation is more of like a guide. Is that how you would describe meeting facilitation, guiding
Yeah,
folks?
there's a saying I learned from AJ and Smart. It's be the guide, not the hero. And so the meaning behind that is that the facilitator is meant to be there to help people through the process, to make it easier, like we talked about. The heroes are really the people coming to the meeting with all the expertise, the subject matter experts, the ones that are actually doing a lot of the work and things like that. So it's really the guide's role to kind of guide them through the process and be the process expert and not the domain expert. So if you think of movies like Star Wars, the guide is more the Obi-Wan Kenobi or the Yoda. It's not the Han Solo or the Luke Skywalker. They're the ones doing a lot of the work and getting the results. If it's Lord of the Rings, it's Gandalf, and it's
Yeah.
not Bilbo or Frodo Baggins who are doing a lot of the work, and along with the other folks and the characters in the movie. So it's really being that guide, helping people through, making it easier for them, knocking down roadblocks and things like that are really the main roles of a facilitator.
Ugh. And I think project managers can just breathe a sigh of relief hearing that. Project managers who are facilitating meetings, which is every single project manager I know,
Sure.
to understand that the pressure, the meeting decisions are not up to you. Um, these are not, that should not be weight on your shoulders. What you should be
Right.
focusing on is maximizing the time that we have in these meetings and making sure that we are covering the touch points that we want to cover and learning how to help guide the team through that. So I'm wondering, do you have any like words or phrases or ways we can say things that that would like gently guide or maybe even more firmly guide the conversation where we want to go? Let's say, for example, you're in a meeting and you just have a couple people that are really off topic. How would you bring that back? Like, what would you say to bring that back on topic?
I'm a big fan of the parking lot. And I would probably say something like, yes, it's a great conversation, needs to happen. Not sure we need to have this with the entire group. Let's put this on a parking lot and we'll set up some time later with the appropriate people and attach it then and attack it then and talk a little bit more about some of these topics. So
Yeah.
I worked with a lot of scrum groups as a scrum master, and with the daily huddles, that's something that we use on a regular basis, that we don't want to get down in the weeds during the huddles, that we want to basically identify things we need to talk about later, but not get into the weeds and keep those moving. And so not everyone, people aren't taking as much time on those on a daily basis. So that's one of the reasons that we do that. And that's great use of the parking lot as well.
Love the parking lot. And that, like you said, I think it is direct enough, but also it's like, hey, we're not just going to ignore this topic because obviously it's of some importance if we
Right.
have a couple people that are concerned about it, but it's
Right.
just not now. Now is not the time.
People typically get it, and other people in the meeting will thank you later. Thank
Yeah,
you for getting off the
right.
topic.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
That's a good one. Um, So, okay, here's another question around the meeting facilitator. We talked a little bit about setting expectations, maybe sending out an agenda. But let's say you are the project manager and you have taken on this role of meeting facilitator. Maybe in the past you haven't been the greatest meeting facilitator, but after watching this YouTube video or listening to this podcast, now you're ready. You're ready to take your meeting facilitation skills to the next level. But your team doesn't really, that's not how they see you. You haven't been that person in the past. How would you help to position a person as a meeting facilitator and go from meetings that are maybe a little hodgepodge to something a little more organized? In what way would you coach a project manager to be able to position themselves as that meeting facilitator versus just a project manager who's taking notes in meetings?
I think there's a couple different things I would suggest to that project manager. I think I would suggest up front that they just mention to the team, hey, next meeting, we're going to try a couple things differently. I've got some ideas for how we can make this meeting more effective, more fun, and get to our outcomes better. So we're going to try a few things. And just to give them that heads up, kind of set the expectation that there's going to be something different coming up than what they've seen in the past. And then when it comes to setting out the invite in advance, make that different as well. Talk about the purpose of the meeting, talk about the agenda, talk about what people need to do before the meeting. I mean, pre-reads and pre-thinking is a great way to kick off a meeting where you give people an idea. Hey, I want you to think about this a couple of days before the meeting and come with some ideas. And that just makes it more of a working session than just a presentation, a one-way presentation.
Yeah.
You kind of give them that heads up that, hey, I'm going to be asking you for some feedback in this meeting. Kind of let them know you expect and what is going to happen and things like that. Once you get into the meeting, I think just have it structured enough that you kind of know what the flow is. And so you know what the timing of each thing is. So you move things along, but don't be too structured. Kind of go with the flow.
Hmm.
If things go in a different direction, let it for a little bit. Maybe let the conversation go for a little bit and take a different approach to things. And you'll still, hopefully still get to the same results. But just now, a lot of that will come with practice. But just have a little flexibility with things so it's not too rigid and like
Hmm.
that. And then I think at the end, to get some feedback from people and say, "Hey, what'd you think? How did this go? How was this compared to the meetings in the past? What did you like? What didn't you like?" And then kind of adapt from there.
I love that. I like how you said in the beginning, say, hey, we're going to try something a little different in this next meeting. That way, it's not like I've decided to become an expert meeting facilitator. And now, for going forward, all of our meetings are going to be structured like this. Because one of the concerns I do hear a lot from folks who watch the channel or project managers that I coach, there's so much information out there. Everyone's learning. We're all hopefully growing and becoming better. But sometimes there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that comes along with that.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I've learned all these new meeting facilitation skills, but that's not been what I've done up to this point. So how can I do that in a way that doesn't come across as me being an imposter? And I think the suggestions that you just gave are fantastic with still allowing a little bit of that flexibility, getting some feedback. This is something that we're trying together. We're all going to try to become better together and grow at this. I love it. I think that makes a lot of sense for project managers or anyone who is leveling up meeting facilitation skills.
Yeah. I think the other thing is that you don't have to try everything at one time. If you have a
Yeah.
certain situation, try one method or try one thing differently than you tried and get some feedback on that, reevaluate, see how you could use it in other places, and then kind of expand. You can start small and kind of grow over time. You don't have to do everything all at one time.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Um, okay. Final topic that we had on the agenda for today. Um, I love this one. I love this one. And actually, I have a bonus question for you too. I ask just about everybody on the channel this one because it's something that I feel so passionate about. It's an easy one. So anyway,
Good.
um, okay. So our next question is around meetings being on the chopping block. Let's say we know meetings are on the radar for a lot of teams, a lot of companies, a lot of executives are saying, okay, let's look at how much meeting time we have because we really want to make sure we're maximizing productivity. So we need to minimize the amount of time that we're in meetings. And in some cases, I think we've all seen some of these organizations that have gone really extreme with their return to office initiatives. And they've even said like no meetings or very, very, very minimal meetings, which I think is a mistake to just blanket state that we shouldn't have any meetings because there's so much value that happens when we come together, we share ideas in a collaborative, structured way. So let's say we're talking to project managers who are in that situation where they're like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to manage my projects now with minimal meetings because it's on the radar of my executives. How do I make sure that I can show every single meeting that I have is delivering value? And as your tagline says, your LinkedIn tagline says, results, right? Propelling towards results. How can project managers or anyone facilitating meetings, I keep saying project managers because I love project managers, but how can we make sure that those results are there? What can we do?
I'd say a couple of things. I'd say begin with taking inventory of your meetings that you have. Make a list, go back through your calendar for the last couple of weeks. Make a list of all the meetings that you've been in, that you've run, and everything like that. And then look back to see what types of meetings those are. The previous topic that we talked about, there's only really probably a handful of different types of meetings. If you put those into those buckets, you could decide, what's the most meetings we have. Maybe it's status meetings. And maybe you have like a bell curve where status meetings are in the middle. Those are the most frequent meetings that you have. say that's the example. So then look to see, okay, what's working on those meetings and what's not. Is there an alternative? Some meetings, it's nice just to turn a meeting into an email
Hmm.
where you can basically just send the information out and say, hey, let me know if we have anything to discuss. We'll get together and chat for a few minutes to discuss that, whether it's one-on-one or with the team or things like that. So I think that's one way to start. It's just by taking that inventory and then looking to see how effective those meetings are and where you can improve them. Other than that, I think some of the tools and techniques that you could use with collaboration, some of the methods using Miro, whiteboard, or things like that will make meetings more effective and more fun as well. And so I think all those things will help you kind of determine what you need to meet effectively, make sure you have a good result at the end, and meeting your outcome is going to do a lot for basically turning around and saying, okay, here's all the meetings I have now, here's what we accomplished in each, and here's the results we've gotten.
I like that. And I liked your suggestion about kind of bucketing the meeting types. Can you remind me? We have status meetings. What else do we have?
We've got status meetings, decision-making meetings, problem-solving meetings, um, feedback meetings like a retrospective or lessons learned. There's probably a few more, but those I think are the main types I would think of up front.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you can go to your calendar, you can bucket all of them up. Like you said, maybe you have some status meetings that could be turned into an email. Maybe there's some sort of reporting that you could have for those meetings, or maybe they don't need to be as frequent or whatever it is, but tie an outcome to those. Here's what we get out of this meeting, and then you can report on it that way. That way it's not like, I don't know, I have all these meetings on my calendar and I have no idea what they are. I meet a lot. I'm in a lot of meetings. Yeah,
There's nothing worse than looking at your calendar for the week and seeing back to back to back meetings every day. You just have no
nothing
time
worse.
to do anything else. So it's very frustrating. So anytime you can turn those into something else or maybe combine a couple meetings, make them more effective, things like that, it's going to just give you time back to do additional things.
What do you think is a good amount of meetings to have in a day? Like what would be the maximum that you would recommend to anyone working?
It probably depends on the individual, but I think it also depends on what you're working on. If you're working on some things where you just need some heads down thinking time, you need some definite blocks of time to do that. You can't do that in little segments of 5, 10, 15, 20
Yeah.
minutes along the way. So, I mean, if I look back a couple years ago when I was running a couple really large projects, I was one of those people with back to back to back, all day long, and I was trying to get things done in the evening, and it's a good way to burn out very quickly.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's nice just to a good day for me would be to look at my calendar and say, okay, I've got a couple meetings in the morning. I got some time in the afternoon, or maybe vice versa, where you've got some large blocks of time where you're not meeting um, to get some other things done as well.
Yeah, like you said, it is a great way to burn out because I was one of those people too, where it was back to back to back for a very long time. And you can function like that for a while until one day it just takes its toll. Mentally, that is a lot to have all of that processing all of
Right.
the time. And then your follow-ups kind of start lacking and the output of your other work starts yeah. So I'm at the point now, like you said, it depends on the person and what your work is and all of that. But I'm to the place now where if I have any more than 3 hours of meetings in a day, I really want to look at why that's happening because there's so much thinking time that I need to have with the work that I do now. So
Right.
yeah, it's good.
Absolutely.
But as a project manager, I also know those things are going to happen. Those meetings are going to pop up. People are going to need you. You can't just turn them away. We're there to support our teams. So it does get a little tricky when you're a project manager that is maybe dealing with multiple projects, really big
Right.
projects, time crunches like we all do. So,
Yeah, I think there's some nice tools out there nowadays too for asynchronous communications, like Teams and Slack and things like that, where you can do a lot of communication back and forth just by chatting.
yeah.
In a chat box and just getting some quick information or throwing a question out there and getting feedback from people, having people review things. that in the past would have required a meeting. So I think that's helping a little bit too.
I think so too. Okay, so I did want to ask you, I did have a bonus question for you. I ask everyone this question because it's a topic that is so near and dear to my heart. We're talking about meetings. We're talking a little bit about imposter syndrome earlier. And I know folks can get anxiety, like they can get a little nervous when they're in these positions where they're in charge of the time, maybe not in charge of the decisions or whatever, but especially if you're a more junior person. So, what's some advice you would give to any person who's like, I get a little nervous or I get a little anxious when I get up and I need to lead a meeting or facilitate this meeting. I just am dealing with these feelings and they can be a little overwhelming. What advice would you give to someone who's navigating that?
What advice would I give? Um, I think first of all, just be aware of that emotion that you're having. Acknowledge it. Okay, I'm nervous. That's okay. Why am I nervous? Well, I want to do a good job. And I may not have done this a whole lot before. That's totally natural. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Uh, but then also just try new things. Maybe get feedback from someone else that's done it and get some tips and tricks from them on how to do that. One thing I always like to remember is that as I'm leading a meeting and doing some of these sessions for facilitating, as I look out upon the crowd, I'm looking out them and knowing that none of them want to be up here more than I do. A lot of people are very happy with, okay, you run the meeting, you do that. I'm just going to give feedback, but it kind of helps to know that people don't want to be up here doing what you're doing. You're doing something difficult, and you're moving things forward, making progress, hopefully having a little fun in the meantime. But I think the other thing is just it takes practice. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll be doing it. And so don't be too hard on yourself about that. Just have a little fun with it and just kind of go with the flow. And after a certain number of times of doing it, you'll look back and say, wow, I've gotten really a lot better than it was up front. And I feel much more comfortable. I'm not as nervous and all that kind of stuff. It just takes practice.
Oh, so true. The more times you do it, the more times you put yourself out there, the easier it becomes. Loved your first point about reflect back on yourself. Why do I feel this way? And then give yourself the truth, which is, I know what I'm doing. I've done this before. Or if you haven't done it before, there's a reason why you're up there. Clearly, you have some ability. And like you said, it's often something where there's eyeballs on us, but eyeballs on us isn't critical. Like people looking at us isn't critical. Often it's just what you said. It's like, wow, thank you for being the one to lead the meeting or going up front,
Right.
or I'm
Right.
really glad that that's not me. I'm a person that really likes feedback in the form of people smiling and nodding because that's what I do a lot, I think.
Uh,
And so if I don't have someone like that in my meeting or in my audience, I can go inside myself and say, oh my gosh, what am I doing wrong? But
right.
that's not the truth. The truth is people are processing however they process, and some people smile and nod, and other people just stare, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one of the difficulties with remote meetings now, especially if people don't have their cameras on. You're not getting that feedback.
Yeah.
And I love when people have the cameras on and when they use emotions, you see reactions floating up the screen, different topics and things like that. It just gives you that feedback and helps you understand that what you're doing is working and things like that. So I agree. It's great to get that feedback.
On the topic of the camera on, I just want to ask you real quick. Do you usually put it out there to your teams that, like, hey, it's recommended that you have the camera on? Do you say it's necessary that we have the camera on? Does it just depend? What's your rule of thumb?
It kind of depends on the team. Some teams are more likely to have them on. Some meet in person on a regular basis anyway, but when they meet remotely, they don't want to have it on. I'm not too tied up with it because I know most of the teams I work with. And so if they don't want to have it on a certain time, I'm okay with that. Other teams always have it on. So I don't know, I kind of go with the flow on that one. But if there is something we need to talk about that I would like to get better and more feedback from, I'll ask people to just turn it on at that point.
Yeah, yeah. I I am a camera on person for myself. I just can't attend a meeting and not have the camera on. I feel like that if I'm there, if my presence is there, then I should be like fully present. And that's what I feel for myself. But I know not everyone has that flexibility or is always in that situation. So definitely there are moments for camera off
Right.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
typically if it's a client call, I'll typically have it on as a project manager, even if nobody else does. But if it's an internal call, it kind of could go either way that way.
Yeah. Yeah. They already know what we look like. So
Yeah, exactly. Give them a break.
yeah, exactly. I love it. Well, okay, thank you so much, Jeff, for all of your insight, all of your wisdom on these topics. Before we go, I would love it if you could tell people where they can find you, how you can help, a little bit more about Jeff Panning.
Sure, sure. Well, on LinkedIn, I post on a regular basis out there. So you'll find me underneath Jeff Panning. Also, I have a website, jeffpanning.com. And it's got some different topics on there about things I present on. I do a lot of presentations for Project Management Institute chapters on different topics, and some of those are out there. I also actually do some training for PMI. I am co-training a training session on requirements and capturing customer requirements. And that's in different cities around the United States. And so I'll be going to like 5 different cities in 2025 doing that. I just started that in 2024, but I'm really enjoying that. So I'd love to hear from anyone through LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Yeah, I really enjoyed watching how you've grown that as well. And you're presenting now to PMI around the country. That's so cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm gonna link up all the resources that you just shared. I'll link those up in the video description too to make it easy for folks to find you.
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, thank you for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, thanks so much, Jeff. Of course, there is someone with a weed eater that is outside right now. I don't even know what they're weed eating. Everything is dead. What are
Never
you
fails, right?
like? Oh,
The
wow.
joy of remote meetings.
Yes. I'm like, really?
When my wife comes home from shopping or something and says, I'm home.
Right? No, yes, it never fails. As soon as you get all set up for a meeting,
Right.
somebody's going to ring the doorbell, the
Yeah,
dog's going to bark. It's
exactly. It's
it's
just all
it's
meant to happen.
Murphy's Law. Yeah.
Right.